my title, it was We Confess in the Age of King Trump, initially. Kingdoms, king. This topic is kind of important to me. We have a civil war in my home. My oldest son is about the biggest Trump supporter on the planet. He sits up in the middle of the night, and I think he says, "Make America great again." If a room's dirty, he's like, "We got to clean this swamp up." And my youngest son is as anti-Trump as he can be. And I hope they're watching, because I did alert them that I would be talking about them in advance. And as a parent, I've found that if I text my kids, it's 50-50 whether they respond to me. But if I tag them on Facebook, the response is instantaneous. So if they're listening, I want a text message, because I'll hear about it. But this election was nuts. This everything was nuts. And then we woke up after the election, and we were living in an episode of the Celebrity Apprentice. We are now. For example, just as an example, not okaying or supporting anything, when the acting attorney general said that she did not support the order of the president, I passed the TV and said, she's going to be fired by the end of the day. And sure enough, just like an episode of the Celebrity Apprentice, she was fired. All that we were missing was Trump sitting next to his son-in-law on one side and probably Ivanka on the other, and going, "That was a tough call, but we had to make it." Just like an episode of the Celebrity Apprentice. We can talk to our president now over POTUS, over Twitter, and he may respond. We can see what he's watching on TV because he's tweeting about what he's watching on TV. It's insane. And whether we support him or not, the world has gone crazy around us, right? How many of you know people who are absolutely, utterly frightened of Trump? He is going to come into their house and steal their children. I look at Thor and I tell him, my dear dog Thor, so don't worry, Trump's not coming to get you. You're a Jack Russell Terrier, you're English, you'll be fine. But the world's gone nuts. I had members of my congregation who, before the election, honestly told me, we don't put signs up, we don't talk about politics because we're afraid. We're afraid. We're afraid of what will happen if we say we're pro-Trump. And then I had members of my congregation who met me after church on the Sunday afterwards in tears. And they were serious. This was not just like they saw a sad movie. What was that musical? I just saw it. Something about a balloon or something. I cried. It was sad. But they were serious because they honestly believed that everything was coming apart. And so what we're going to talk about in the next 15 minutes is being a Christian in a world in which, with the government. It'll be two kingdoms, but it'll be two kingdoms in the context of our present situation with a president that some really like and some really don't. Everyone together, please. And if you're at home, you can say it too. People will just think that you're talking to yourself. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against the authorities is rebelling against what God has instituted. For those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers who hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to feel free from the fear of one in authority? Then do what is right, and he will commend you. For he is God's servant to do good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, an agent of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. I'm sorry about the typo. We went to dinner with Pastor Swirla yesterday, and when you eat with Pastor Swirla, you eat a bunch of foods that you have no idea what they are. Food was passed to me, and I would just eat it. And I was so afraid. At one point, I ate food that I didn't even like, squash. I didn't even know it was squash. And I was so lost. And I finally looked at my friend Kurt, and I said, what is this? And he goes, I don't know it either. We just eat it because Swirla does. I felt so much better. But that's the cause of the typo, I'm sure. Not that I'm crazy. Think about this. This is from the Catechism of Civil Government. It's in the section of the Catechism known as the Table of Duties. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities. And this, what is interesting about this is there's no authority except that which God has established. This is from Romans 13. So the authorities that exist in this world, the government that exists in this world, was instituted by God. That we have a president, that we have a Congress, is from whom? God. Now, we live in a different universe than St. Paul's day. St. Paul had an emperor. We actually have a say-so in who our leaders are. So, if our leaders are given to us by God, they're given to us because we wanted them. Think about that. We wanted them. He gives us what we want in America. Now, this is sort of, God does this in the Old Testament too. They wanted a king, just like all the nations. And so he gave them a king, just like all the nations. Even though he warned them, he's going to take your kids, and he's going to put them in the army. He's going to take your wives and take your daughters. Take your daughter. Well, they did take wives too. He's going to take your daughters and marry them. He's going to tax you, etc. If you want a king, you can have one. We live in a nation where we choose our own leaders. But behind this, we choose our own leaders, is God. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities. There's no authority except that which God has established. Submitting means to line up behind. Means you put them first. The reason why you keep the speed limit, maybe, is because, well, God has given you a speed limit. And he's used the government to do that. The government is the first use of the law. What is the three uses of the law? Do you remember? What's the first one? Curb. Second one is? Mirror. Third one is? Guide. Big fan of all three uses of the law. All right? But the curb is what the government is. The government is established by God to curb sin, to keep it under control. What does that mean? Well, the reason why your life doesn't look like an episode of Walking Dead, minus the zombies, is because God's gift of government. Gift. The reason why people are just running through your stuff, taking what they want, is because of God's gift of the government. And it's a gift. God doesn't give this gift in order to punish you. Like, I'm having a really bad day here, and so I'm going to give you Trump. No, everything is working out for your good. We're going to get that as we go along. But what we're given to do is to line up behind the authorities that God himself has instituted, even if those authorities don't believe that God himself has instituted them. That's profound. Our government does not believe that it's instituted by God. Well, our government is here because, well, God's given it to us as a gift. The authorities that exist have been established by God. He who rebels against those authorities is rebelling against whom? God. Now, the way this works out in the Civil War in my family, and we're used to having a Civil War, I saw a picture of two Borghardts, one dressed in Yankee Union blues, and the other dressed in the colors of the Confederacy. One went off and fought for the South, and the other married a girl, and that changes everything. He went up and fought for the North. Well, my two boys, living in the world that they're living in, one of them says, he's not my president. How many of you heard that? Trump isn't my president. Right? That's like gravity doesn't apply to me. The only person in this room for whom gravity doesn't apply is my dear friend Swirly, who's only kept on this earth by said gravity. And my son doesn't miss it either. The oldest son looks back at him and goes, well, now you know how I've felt the last 8 years. But both of them are wrong. Because the president that they have is their president. And this isn't just an American thing, because God isn't an American. What? Last I saw, my church had an American flag in it, Pastor. Well, what kind of flag do you think that there are in the Canadian Lutheran churches? Can you imagine that? They do not fly an American Lutheran flag there. God's not an American. He's not a Republican. He's not a Democrat. He's not even a libertarian. God establishes these things to contain sin. Or as Swirla said hinted at in the sermon, because your old Adam needs restraint. Your old Adam only cares about himself and needs to be restrained to drive peaceably in this world on the highway and not treat it like it's the Autobahn. Your old Adam needs to be restrained, or you'll just hit each other or steal from each other. My old Adam needs to be restrained, or I'll just download stuff off the internet, whether legal or illegal. Use other people's Netflix passwords and Hulu passwords. Who needs to pay for Hulu when my best buddy has it? We don't have these authorities. The authorities that exist from God. But I thought we had an institution, I thought we had a separation of church and state. Well, the two kingdoms isn't a separation of church and state. When Lutherans talk about the two kingdoms, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the separation between, in Lutheranism, we're talking about the distinction between a temporal kingdom and an eternal one. A temporal order and an eternal Lord. We'll get to that. A separation between church and state is a separation between two institutions. An institution of a government and an institution of a church, a visible church. That's not the doctrine of the two kingdoms. The doctrine of the two kingdoms is God gave you the government as a gift to restrain you and those around you. And there's a Jesus who's King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who's going to save you when your little ticker runs out of juice. For rulers who hold no terror, for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. So we have nothing to worry about from the government as long as we do right. But if we do wrong, and Luther says, Christians should know that being a Christian doesn't exempt you from the laws of the land. So you can't, when they show up at your door, say, I'm sorry, it doesn't apply, I'm in Christ. I use this. Oh no, I can't do this on the internet. Yes, I can. This, I drive everywhere with this on, just in case I don't obey the speed limit. But it shouldn't be so. I shouldn't get out of tickets because I have this on. If I'm driving 60 and a 30, I should get the ticket. One time I didn't have this on, and my son was sitting next to me, and I'm reaching for it, and I'm rolling down the window at the same time, and my son says, as the window's open, you better put your collar on so you can get out of this ticket like you get out of all the other ones. And there I'm looking at the officer, and he's like, nope. You are grounded forever. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and he will commend you. For he is God's servant for your good. And Luther says, God's servant, whether he believes it or not. I don't believe Trump is particularly a Christian. I don't think that's what matters to him. All right? I think he wants to believe in God. I think the presidency may be the best thing for his religion because he wants to believe in God. He says, I believe in God. I pray to him all the time. I've never asked him for forgiveness, but I pray to him. All right. Then do what is right, and he will commend you, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. So the sword is what? What's the sword? Well, it could look like a gun. It could look like a taser. It could look like a police officer. It could look like a Marine. It could look like a special forces guy. It could look like an aircraft carrier. The sword is the purpose of the government. So if you break the law, you get jail. Now again, this is a gift to us. And we only spot it as a gift in Christ, right? It's not a burden. We only spot it as a gift in Christ, but God has given me this government in order that I could live peaceably in this earth, so that I could go to church and hear my pastor preach the gospel, so that I can open my Bible at home and read it, so it's not illegal, so that I can go and receive the sacrament. That's why God gave me a church, so that I would be free to do that. Of citizens, together. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. More, come on. It is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also because of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes. For the authorities are God's servants, who give their full time to government. Give everyone what you owe him. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Give to what is owed to everyone. Okay, so the government is established by God, first use of the law. Okay? Gift to you. All right? Gift to you, doing good. It's also a gift to you if you don't do good, because it sets you right. All right? But the government is not your religion, and nor is whoever is president someone you should trust in. That sermon was great. Trust not in princes. So, Borghardt, when he was our president, we should have never trusted that he would be the end-all, be-all good. And Trump, who is our president now, should we trust that he's going to be the end-all and source of good for us? We might as well have Nebuchadnezzar, if that's the way we're going to live. So it doesn't matter who the president is, he's there for your good. Now, this president, we've seen some good things. A good judge. If we're pro-life, good judge. But to think that he's the end all would be to put our trust in man. And who's our trust supposed to be in? Jesus. And see, the thing about thinking this through when it comes to our leaders, whether he's a good leader or not, is the Lord of heaven and earth. Jesus can stand before Pilate, isn't particularly a good man, and have a discussion with him and say, you have no authority other than that which has been given to you from above. And submit to him as the governor. He submitted to it. But if Jesus can deal with Pilate and everything's going to be okay, can you and I deal with either Trump or whoever else may come without losing our minds? One way or another. And the great thing about America is if we don't like our president, what do? Vote him out. Oh, this is the most important thing, though. As Christians, this is what we do for our president. Please read.
I encourage them, first of all, that the requests, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for everyone, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live in peaceful and quiet lives, in all godliness and holiness. This is good and pleases God our Savior.
And the next bit of this verse is, who desires all men to be saved and become to the knowledge of the truth. Which means you're praying for your leaders so that God would make a peaceful world for you, so that you could hear the gospel. Only in Christ would you see that. Otherwise, praying for your leaders would be a burden. My college students, when they knew that I didn't really support President Obama, would laugh the first time I would pray for him in the prayers, as if that was something special. You had to pray for Obama. It's like, well, I'd be praying for the president anyway. And someone did comment, I think it was yesterday, praying for Trump is like it's just surreal. It's like listening, that made it real for me. Well, yes. So you pray for your leaders. You pray for those who are in authority. That's how you deal with it as a Christian, whether you are pro or against, whether you're scared of him or pro him, because Christians have lived under governments, even when those governments were crucifying them and lighting the roads with them, with their bodies burning. What if the government asks you to do something that's contrary to the gospel? What do you do then? Who must you obey? You must obey God rather than men. But the speed limit, not murdering, paying your taxes, even Jesus paid taxes. He and Peter walking on their way. Peter's like, I don't know how we're going to pay this temple tax. Jesus is like, okay, why don't you throw a, she's giving me a sign that I got to finish up. But I'll finish up when I finish up. But he said, go catch a fish. Peter catches a fish, and what comes out of the fish's mouth? The temple tax coin. And they paid the tax. Dear friends,
remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready to do whatever is good.
So you have a government, this first use of the law given to you as a gift to give you the freedom to hear the gospel and to protect you from evil. This government is given for your good. Those people in positions of power are there for your good. You try to find the gifts that are in those leaders as best you can, and if you don't like them, you get new ones, because we're in America. All right? But understanding that no matter what else happens, the only way you can find good in an evil world is in whom? The other kingdom, Christ, who is King of kings and Lord of lords, the one who was crucified, died, and rose again for you, the one who lives and reigns to all eternity. This kingdom will pass away. There may not always be an America. There may not always be a Trump. There may not always be the whatever ruler that comes on after him. But this kingdom will never, ever end. And the real world is not gone mad, because the real world for you is where Jesus is king, isn't it? So the two kingdoms for you is basically the proper distinction between law and gospel. Law in the world to restrain evil for your good. All right? And the other kingdom, eternal gospel, forgiveness of sins, life, and salvation.